If you've ever waited for a message that should have been automatic, you know the loneliness it creates. Not the dramatic kind where people notice and rush in. The quiet kind where the house is still, the clock is loud, and your hope keeps making excuses for someone else's absence today. That was me on the morning of our anniversary. I woke up before my alarm, the way I always did when something mattered. The sunlight was thin and pale, stretching across the bedroom wall like a promise. Beside me, my husband slept on his back, breathing evenly, as if nothing in the world needed remembering. I lay there waiting for the familiar shift, the sleepy smile, the reach for my waist, the soft, "Happy anniversary, babe." Instead, he rolled over and grabbed his phone. The screen lit his face, and then he angled it away from me. He wasn't even fully awake, and already the first thing he protected was whatever lived behind that glass. He scrolled, thumb moving, then set it face down on the nightstand. "Morning," he murmured like any other day. "Morning," I said back, because I didn't want to be the woman who ruins a day before it starts. Because I wanted him to remember on his own. Because lately, my version of love had become patience dressed up as dignity. I told myself there would be a surprise, flowers while I showered, a dinner reservation, a card under my coffee mug. Hope is a powerful thing. It makes you ignore the small cuts. In the kitchen, I moved through my routine quietly. I brewed his coffee the way he liked it, strong, no sugar, a little extra cream. I placed the mug on the counter and waited for his eyes to widen, for him to laugh and say, "I can't believe I almost forgot," and then pull something from behind his back. He walked in, kissed my cheek like a polite coworker, and lifted the mug without looking at me. "Big day," he said, and the words hit me like a puzzle piece that didn't belong. "For work?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Yeah," he said. "Meetings all day, might be late." Late. On our anniversary. There it was, the first bruise, delivered in a sentence so casual it almost felt like I imagined the sting. I watched him sip, watched his eyes drift back to the phone, watched him check it twice in 30 seconds. Each time, his mouth tightened in a way that used to mean stress. Now it meant something else I couldn't name. I swallowed the ache and tried again. I was thinking maybe we could do something tonight. He paused, like the question cost him something. "Let's see," he answered. "Depends how the day goes." Depends, as if celebrating us was weather. As if I was asking for an extra favor, not a shared memory. When he went to shower, I stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the steam curling off his coffee. I told myself I was calm, that grown-up love didn't need anniversaries like it needed oxygen. But it mattered because I remembered our first anniversary, when he surprised me with a weekend away and a letter that made me cry in the car. Back then, he looked at me like I was home. Now he looked at me like a schedule. Somewhere along the way, our marriage had become a series of almosts. Almost present, almost listening, almost choosing each other. I kept telling myself it was normal, work gets busy, people get tired, love changes shape. But love isn't supposed to make you feel alone while you're still married. By mid-morning, he was dressed and moving fast, that practiced urgency that made it impossible to ask questions without sounding like an accusation. He checked his watch, grabbed his keys, and did that half-turn at the door, just enough to perform affection. "Love you," he said. I waited for the rest, the wink, the happy anniversary, the promise. It didn't come. "Love you too," I replied, the words tasting like compromise. After he left, the silence expanded. I stood in the entryway staring at the spot where his shoes had been, like I could rewind the moment and find the missing piece. This was a day I'd been saving in my heart like a bookmark in a story. I tried to distract myself with chores, with emails, with anything that would keep my mind from circling the same thought. Maybe he really forgot. And the darker one that followed right behind it, whispering where certainty used to live. Or maybe he didn't. By noon, I checked my phone more than I'd admit to anyone. No message, no heart emoji, no "can't wait for tonight," just the blank screen reflecting my face back at me. That's when I realized the waiting wasn't romantic anymore. It was surveillance. It was me measuring my worth in notifications. If he had forgotten, it would hurt. But if he remembered and chose not to say it, that would mean something else entirely. I didn't know it yet, but that day wasn't going to end with a late dinner or an apology. It was going to end with a truth I couldn't unsee, and the first step was admitting the question that scared me most. What if this wasn't neglect, but replacement? People think betrayal arrives like a slammed door, loud, obvious, impossible to mistake. But for me, it came like dust. Quiet, gradual, settling on things I used to see clearly until one day I couldn't remember what normal looked like without wiping my eyes first. I met him on a day I wasn't looking for anything. It was a friend's birthday at a crowded little restaurant, the kind where the lights are warm and everyone talks too loudly because it feels like celebration. I remember turning to ask for water and seeing him already watching me, not in a creepy way, more like recognition. Like he'd been waiting for a face he could trust. He smiled when I caught him and didn't look away. That was the first thing I loved about him, how present he was. How he showed up. When we started dating, he was the kind of man who made decisions with his whole chest. If he said he'd call at 8, my phone rang at 8. If he promised to help me move, he arrived early with coffee and extra boxes. He listened like my words mattered, like my worries had weight. I'd grown up around love that was unpredictable, affection traded like currency, apologies that never turned into change, so his steadiness felt like safety. Trust versus fear, and for once, trust was winning. We built our relationship the way people build a house when they believe the foundation will last. Slowly, intentionally. We talked about the future like it was a shared language. He asked me what kind of life I wanted, and he didn't laugh when I said I wanted peace. Not the kind you post online, the real kind. The kind you can breathe inside. When he proposed, he did it in our apartment kitchen, not a rooftop, not a crowd. He made pasta, burned the garlic bread, and still insisted it was perfect because it's our first of many. He got down on one knee between the fridge and the sink and looked up at me like I was the only person in the world. I said yes before he finished the question. That's the truth. I didn't hesitate. I believed him with my whole body. Marriage at first felt like a widening. Like someone had opened a window in my life and let in more light. We developed rituals, Sunday grocery runs, Thursday takeout, laughing in bed at stupid videos, arguing about paint colors, and then kissing in the hallway because it wasn't really about the paint. I kept little notes of things he liked. The brand of crackers, the kind of socks, the playlist that made him feel invincible. He did the same for me. He brought me flowers on random Tuesdays. He remembered. Then life did what life does. Work got heavier. Bills got louder. We got older. The days started moving faster than our conversations. But even then, I thought we were okay because love isn't only fireworks. It's also dishes and laundry and choosing each other in the boring parts. The shift didn't happen in one argument. It happened in 100 small moments I excused because I didn't want to be dramatic. The first time he forgot a date night, I laughed it off. The second time, I rescheduled. The third time, I stopped putting on lipstick until after he texted, "On my way," because I didn't want to feel foolish in a dress with nowhere to go. Somewhere in there, I became the keeper of the calendar. Birthdays, appointments, family events. I learned his deadlines better than he knew mine. I remembered to call his father. I bought the cards, wrapped the gifts, planned the meals. I told myself this was partnership, different strengths, different roles. But the truth was sharper. I was carrying the we by myself and calling it love so it wouldn't feel like abandonment. Emotional labor is invisible until you stop doing it. When I stopped reminding him about things, they didn't happen. When I stopped initiating conversations, silence moved in like a new roommate. When I stopped reaching for his hand, he didn't notice the space between us, or maybe he did and enjoyed it. I'd ask, "Are we okay?" And he'd answer, "Of course," like the question itself was the problem. He started using exhaustion as a shield. "I'm tired. It's been a day. Can we not do this right now?" And because I loved him, because I remembered the man who used to show up, I kept waiting for a better time. I kept postponing my needs until they felt impolite to have. That's how you start ignoring your instincts. You treat them like inconveniences. You tell yourself you're being sensitive. You compare your pain to other people's tragedies and decide you don't deserve to complain. You become grateful for crumbs because once you had a feast, and admitting the table is empty feels like admitting you chose wrong. I learned to read his moods like weather. If he was distant, I blamed my tone. If he was kind, I erased yesterday. That's how love turns into a test you keep retaking. Even when the warning signs stacked up, his phone always on him, his laughter quieter around me but bright in other rooms, the way he'd shower immediately after getting home like he was washing off a life I didn't belong to, I still translated everything into the language of benefit of the doubt. Stress, midlife, work politics, depression, anything but what my gut kept whispering in the dark. Because the scariest possibility wasn't that he might be lying. The scariest possibility was that I had been hearing the truth for months and choosing not to listen. I started measuring my worth in his attention, and I hated myself for it. I hated the way my mood rose and fell with his tone. I hated that I could be proud at work and still feel small at home. I hated that I'd rehearse conversations in the mirror so I wouldn't cry when I spoke to my own husband. Weakness versus strength, and I kept pretending strength meant silence. But even in that pretending, a part of me stayed awake. A part of me noticed how often he said, I, and how rarely he said, we. A part of me felt the difference between privacy and secrecy. A part of me knew that love doesn't feel like waiting in an empty room for footsteps that never come. I'd moved cities for his promotion, turned down a course I wanted, stopped meeting friends after work because he liked dinner. I told myself compromise was romance, but slowly the compromises became one-way roads, and I forgot where I ended. That's why our anniversary mattered so much to me, not because I needed a grand gesture, because anniversaries are proof. They're the dates you circle as a promise to pause and look at each other again. I told myself that if he remembered this, if he chose me on this day, maybe the man I married was still somewhere inside the man I lived with. And when he forgot, I told myself it was just life, until the details didn't add up. By late afternoon, my hope had started to feel like something I'd borrowed and needed to return. The kind of hope that looks brave from the outside, but up close, is just a woman refusing to admit she's the only one still trying. I kept telling myself it's coming. He's working. He's busy. He's going to walk through the door with that sheepish smile and say, I wanted to surprise you. But as the sky softened into evening, the house stayed exactly the same, quiet, untouched, indifferent. No knock, no delivery, no bouquet on the porch that the neighbors would pretend not to notice. At 5:30, I set 2 plates on the table anyway. Not because I believed we were about to have a romantic dinner, but because I wanted to behave like someone whose love was still being met. I lit a candle and immediately felt ridiculous, like I was playing a role in a marriage that had already ended without telling me. When my phone finally buzzed, my heart jumped before my brain could protect it. His text was 3 words, running late, sorry. No happy anniversary. No, I miss you. No, can we celebrate tomorrow? Just a flat update like I was his landlord. I stared at the message, so long the screen dimmed. My first instinct was to reply with something gentle. Okay, be safe. Because that's what I did. I softened everything so it wouldn't hurt him, even when I was the one bleeding. But this time, my thumbs hovered, and I couldn't make myself send comfort to someone who hadn't offered me even a sentence of love. So I didn't answer right away. I washed the dishes that didn't need washing. I folded towels that were already folded. I moved around the house like motion could calm the noise inside me. The sadness wasn't dramatic. It was heavy. It sat on my chest like a hand. He came home a little after 8. Not stumbling, not flustered, just normal. Too normal. He walked in with his work bag, loosened his tie, and nodded at me like we'd passed each other in a hallway. Hey, he said. I watched him closely, waiting for the late twist, the reveal. A grin, a hidden bag, anything that would make me feel foolish for doubting. Nothing. He set his keys in the bowl. He didn't look around for flowers because he hadn't brought any. He didn't ask why I was dressed because he hadn't noticed. He didn't say the word anniversary because the word didn't exist in his mouth. I swallowed hard. You're home. Yeah, he said, already walking toward the kitchen. Long day. He opened the fridge and stared into it like the contents were a surprise, like he didn't live here. I could feel my heart doing that stupid thing it does when you're trying not to cry, beating too fast, making your throat tight. I wanted to ask, did you forget? But the question felt humiliating, like begging him to confirm my value. So instead I tried for casual. I made dinner. He glanced at the stove. Oh, I ate already. The words hit me so cleanly I almost laughed. Ate already, on our anniversary, somewhere else, without me. Oh, I repeated, and I hated how small it sounded. He grabbed a bottle of water and leaned against the counter, drinking like he'd just finished a workout, not an entire day of being absent from a marriage. I searched his face for guilt, for apology, for something warm. He gave me nothing. Finally, because silence was starting to feel like surrender, I said, "Do you know what today is?" He didn't even blink. He didn't look confused. He didn't pause like someone reaching into memory. He answered immediately, smooth as a practiced line. "Tuesday." That's when the room tilted. Not because he forgot our anniversary, because his response was too quick, too flat, too certain. Like he'd prepared for this question and decided on the safest answer. I forced a thin smile. It's our anniversary. A beat, not surprise, not embarrassment, just a slight tightening around his mouth. Oh, he said, right. Right. As if I'd reminded him, the trash goes out on Wednesdays. I've had a lot on my mind, he added, and the explanation landed before I even asked for one. He stepped closer, kissed my forehead, not my mouth, and patted my shoulder like I was a child who needed soothing. "I'm sorry," he said, but his eyes were already drifting away, looking past me toward his phone on the counter. I stood there, candle still unlit on the table, 2 plates still waiting like a joke, and I realized something I didn't want to know. His apology wasn't for forgetting. It was for being caught not pretending. You didn't even text," I said quietly. "I know," he replied. "I've been slammed. We can do something this weekend." We can do something this weekend. Like it was a dentist appointment we'd reschedule. My sadness started changing shape. It sharpened. It became a question with teeth. "Where were you?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "At the office," he said without hesitation. "Then I grabbed food with the guys." "The guys," I repeated. "From work." "Yeah," he said. "It was last minute." He picked up his phone, and that's when I saw it. A small thing, barely a flicker. The screen lit, a banner notification sliding across the top, and before he could swipe it away, my eyes caught the words. "Reservation confirmed. 7:30 p.m. Table for 2. Time slowed in a way that made my stomach drop. A reservation for 2 at 7:30 while I was at home setting a table like a fool. He swiped it away so fast it was almost violent, and for a second I wondered if I'd imagined it, if grief was making me hallucinate proof. But I hadn't imagined it. I knew what I saw. "What was that?" I asked, and my voice sounded different, lower, steadier, like the part of me that used to be afraid had stepped aside. He didn't miss a beat. Nothing, just spam, some email thing. Spam doesn't say reservation confirmed. Spam doesn't show a time. Spam doesn't arrive on the one night you forgot your anniversary. My heart was pounding, but my face stayed calm. I watched him the way you watch someone when you realize you've been watching wrong for a long time. He shifted his weight, already annoyed. "Why are you interrogating me?" There it was. The flip, the redirect, make me the problem so he doesn't have to be. "I'm not interrogating," I said slowly. "I'm asking." He sighed, exaggerated. "You're making a big deal out of this." A big deal. My chest tightened again, but it wasn't only pain anymore. It was anger, not the messy kind, the clean kind that finally says enough. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply nodded, as if I accepted his version of reality. Because I'd learned something important over the years. When someone is lying, they rely on your emotions to distract you from their details. So I let him have the moment. He walked past me toward the bedroom, already done with the conversation. "I'm going to shower," he said, like the day was over, like my disappointment could be rinsed off with his sweat. As soon as he disappeared down the hall, the house went still again. But this time, the stillness wasn't empty. It was loaded. I stood in the kitchen staring at the place where the notification had flashed, my mind replaying it like a paused scene. Reservation confirmed. 7:30, table for two. Accident versus intention. Innocent mistake versus deliberate concealment. If he forgot, there wouldn't be a reservation. And if there was a reservation, then he didn't forget. My hands were shaking as I picked up my own phone. My instinct screamed at me to stop, to preserve whatever piece I could salvage. But another instinct, older, wiser, rose up under it. The one that knows peace built on lies is just quiet damage. I wasn't trying to catch him. I was trying to understand why my heartbreak had a paper trail. I didn't chase him down the hallway. I didn't pound on the bathroom door demanding answers. I did what I'd trained myself to do for years whenever my heart started screaming. I went quiet, because quiet was how I survived him. Quiet was how I kept the peace. But quiet has another purpose too. Quiet lets you hear the truth. While the shower ran, I stood in the kitchen with my phone in my hand, staring at my own reflection in the dark window above the sink. My face looked normal, same eyes, same mouth, but something behind them had shifted, like a light had been turned on in a room I'd avoided for too long. Reservation confirmed. A simple phrase, and suddenly my whole marriage felt like a story with missing pages. I told myself to be rational. Maybe it was an old reservation. Maybe it was a work dinner. Maybe table for two was him and a client. Maybe he was planning a surprise and the notification had ruined it. Maybe. Hope doing its old job, working overtime to protect me from reality. I walked to the living room where our shared tablet sat on the side table, plugged in like it belonged to both of us. We'd bought it years ago for recipes and movies, back when we still sat close on the couch without thinking about it. Our accounts were linked because, at some point, we'd assumed there was nothing to hide. I wasn't proud of what I was doing. I also wasn't wrong. I woke the screen. Notifications waited there too, stacked like unopened letters. The email app opened without asking for a sign-in. My fingers shook as I searched reservation, and the results appeared immediately. There it was again. Same restaurant name. Same time. Same date, today's date, our anniversary, the day he'd looked me in the face and called Tuesday. I tapped it. The message was cheerful and polished, full of exclamation points that made my stomach turn. It thanked him for choosing them for a special evening and confirmed a 7:30 p.m. table for two. Then came the details, the kind you only list when you're trying to impress someone. Occasion, anniversary. Seating preference, quiet corner booth. Drink preference, brut champagne, chilled, ready upon arrival. Note, you don't know what you did to me this year. Tonight is mine. Music request, a specific song. Occasion, anniversary. Not business dinner, not team meeting, anniversary. My anniversary. My hands went cold, the way they do when your body realizes danger before your pride does. I kept reading, hopping, stupidly, painfully, that somewhere inside the email my name would appear, that it would say happy anniversary and include me in the sentence. It didn't. It was addressed to him, like he was a man arriving with someone worthy of planning. The note, "Tonight is mine," was the kind of sentence you write when you believe you've won something, and the song request twisted the knife deeper because I recognized it instantly. We danced to that song in our first apartment kitchen, barefoot on cheap tile, laughing because we didn't have furniture yet. He used to call it our reset button. Now it had been reassigned, like our memories were just a playlist he could share. Love language versus replacement. He still knew how to be romantic. He had simply stopped using it on me. For a moment, denial tried to stand back up. Maybe he picked anniversary because the restaurant asked and he didn't want to explain. Maybe the note was dramatic on purpose. Maybe he planned to surprise me and I'd just ruined it. but denial can't survive details. I scrolled down to the bottom of the email and tapped Manage Reservation. A page loaded with more information. My breath caught as my eyes landed on the line that mattered most. Guest name, Elise. Not mine. Elise. The name looked elegant on the screen, like it belonged to a woman who didn't spend her evenings waiting for crumbs of attention. I stared until the letters stopped feeling like letters and started feeling like a verdict. In the bathroom, the shower shut off. The sudden silence was loud. I turned the tablet's screen dark and set it down carefully, like it might explode if I moved too fast. I sat with my hands in my lap, listening to the sounds of him moving around, towel, drawer, the soft click of a bottle cap. Then, unbelievably, he hummed. A low, casual tune, as if he just had a normal day and a normal dinner and nothing about our life was breaking in two. That hum did something cruel inside me, because it told me he wasn't panicking. He wasn't afraid. He didn't think he was losing me. He thought he'd already replaced me. My chest tightened with the urge to run down the hallway and say her name out loud, Elise, just to watch his face crack, just to force him into the helplessness he'd been feeding me for months. Instead, I stood and walked to the dining table. I looked at the 2 plates I'd set earlier, the neat silverware, the candle waiting to be lit like a prayer no one planned to answer. I lifted the candle and blew gently across the wick. Nothing to extinguish, and still I felt the symbol of it, an evening prepared for love, left unclaimed. I went back to the kitchen and opened my phone, hands steadier now. If the reservation existed, there would be a trace somewhere else too. I logged into our credit card account and searched the transactions. There it was, the restaurant charge, posted, not pending. A full amount, the kind that says champagne and dessert, the kind that says make her feel special. A timestamp sat beside it, tidy and merciless. And suddenly, my sadness wasn't soft anymore. It was sharp with clarity. He hadn't forgotten our anniversary. He'd used it. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the tablet or call my best friend for a midnight rescue. I did the opposite. I started collecting. Screenshots, dates, times. The kind of proof you gather when you realize feelings will be treated like opinions. I saved the email, took a photo of the reservation page, and wrote Elise in my notes app like I was afraid the name would evaporate if I didn't anchor it. That's the strange thing about betrayal. Your first instinct is to protect the betrayer. I still wanted to believe there was a harmless explanation, because the alternative meant accepting that our vows were not broken by accident, but by design. When you see design, you wonder what else was engineered in dark. Being overlooked is painful, but being substituted is a different kind of injury. Overlooked says you weren't seen. Substituted says you were seen and deemed replaceable. In the hallway, his footsteps approached. I locked my phone and set it down on the counter. My hands didn't shake. That scared me more than the shaking had. He entered the kitchen in fresh clothes, hair damp, face relaxed. "Hey," he said again, like the world hadn't changed. I looked at him and understood, with terrifying calm, that the most dangerous lies aren't the dramatic ones. They're the everyday ones, spoken in the same voice you once trusted with your life. I kept thinking, maybe it's a surprise, until I saw the name attached to the booking. After I saw her name, Elise, everything in the house looked the same, but nothing felt the same. Our couch was still our couch. The family photos still lined the hallway. His shoes still sat by the door like they belonged to a man who came home honest. But now every familiar detail felt staged, like a set built to keep me comfortable while the real story happened somewhere off camera. He leaned against the counter, scrolling his phone with his thumb, the screen angled away from me out of habit. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look guilty. He looked practiced. And that was what chilled me most. "Long day," he said again, like repetition could turn it into truth. I nodded, forcing my face to stay neutral. "Yeah, I can tell." He didn't notice the edge in my voice, or maybe he did, and decided not to touch it. He opened a cabinet, grabbed a snack, and started chewing like a man who'd eaten dinner but wanted a little something extra. like a man who didn't care that the woman across from him had set a table for two. I waited for an apology to grow real, for him to say, "I messed up," for him to reach for me in a way that meant I mattered. Instead, he asked, "You okay?" The question almost made me laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was cruel. Like he had the nerve to check the temperature of the room while holding the match behind his back. "I'm fine," I lied, because I wasn't ready to reveal what I knew. Not yet. Evidence first. Clarity first. My feelings had been dismissed too many times to walk into another conversation empty-handed. He nodded once, satisfied, and walked out of the kitchen. The moment he disappeared, I felt the air rush back into my lungs like I'd been underwater. And in that breath, my mind did what it always did after shock. It started rewinding. I retraced the last few months, not as the wife who wanted to believe, but as the woman who had just found a reservation labeled anniversary with another woman's name on it. That single fact changed the angle of every memory, like tilting a photo and suddenly seeing what had been hidden in the glare. There had been the late nights. At first, they made sense. His company was restructuring, he said. Deadlines, pressure, promotions. He'd come home with his tie loosened and his eyes tired, and I'd meet him at the door with reheated dinner and a soft voice. I'd ask, "How was your day?" And he'd answer, "I don't want to talk about it." He became a man I wasn't allowed to know. Then the late nights grew teeth. Not just late, unpredictable, Tuesdays, Thursdays, sometimes weekends. He stopped giving details, started giving summaries. "Work stuff. Just a lot. Don't worry about it." Don't worry about it. The phrase that turns love into obedience. And I had worried. Quietly. Constantly. But every time I tried to bring it up, he made me feel like I was asking for something unreasonable, like wanting transparency in a marriage was a flaw in my character. "There you go again," he'd say, rubbing his forehead like I was giving him a headache. "You're overthinking. Why can't you just trust me?" Trust, the word he used like a weapon. Then there was the grooming. It happened slowly, almost comically, like a man trying on a new version of himself. He bought cologne he'd never worn before, something expensive and sharp that didn't smell like home. He started getting haircuts more often. He began trimming his beard with a precision he never used to care about. He even bought new underwear, which sounds like a joke until you realize married men don't usually upgrade that part of their life unless they expect someone new to see it. When I teased him, trying to keep it light, he'd shrug. "Just trying to feel better." But he didn't try to feel better with me. He didn't plan date nights or book trips or ask what would make me happy. He was polishing himself for a room I wasn't in. And then his phone. That was the biggest shift, the clearest rhythm once you knew to listen for it. We used to share everything without thinking. If his phone buzzed while he was driving, he'd hand it to me. "Can you check that?" If mine rang while I was cooking, he'd answer. We were a team in the simplest ways. Then, one day, I reached for his phone to check the time, and he snatched it back like I'd touched a wound. "Don't," he said quickly. I blinked. I was just, "I don't like people going through my stuff," he snapped, then softened his voice like he'd caught himself. "It's personal." Personal, in a marriage. After that, he kept it on him like a heartbeat. Bathroom, shower, even when he took out the trash. The phone came with him like a secret he couldn't risk leaving in the open. And I started doing something I promised myself I'd never do. I started doubting my own reality. Because when you're repeatedly dismissed, your instincts start to feel like betrayal. Like you're the one being disloyal for even noticing. He became skilled at it, gaslighting with a calm face. If I asked why he'd come home so late, he'd say, "I told you I had a meeting," even if he hadn't. If I said he seemed distant, he'd say, "You're imagining things." If I cried, he'd stand there with that exhausted expression and ask, "Are you done?" The worst part wasn't the lack of affection. It was the way he made me feel crazy for needing it. I began rewriting myself to fit his comfort. I monitored my tone. I practiced calm. I swallowed questions. I apologized for emotions he caused. And here's the part that still makes my stomach twist. I started believing him. There were nights I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was just too needy, too dramatic, too sensitive. I'd scroll through old photos of us like I was searching for proof that my memory was real. That's what gaslighting does. It doesn't just lie to you, it trains you to distrust the part of you that knows the difference. But once I saw Elise's name, the training started to wear off. Like waking up after months in a fog and realizing you've been walking in circles. I opened our bank account history again, slower this time, not scanning for one big smoking gun but for the small repeating beats. Patterns, rhythms, the way a double life keeps time. And there it was. Not one restaurant charge, several. Not one boutique purchase, multiple. A flower shop I'd never received flowers from. A hotel bar charge on a night he said he was working late. A rideshare receipt at 11:18 p.m. to a part of town he had no reason to be in. My skin prickled as I lined them up like dominoes, date after date, week after week, not random, not accidental. Deliberate. Then I saw something else. A recurring charge labeled with a generic name, small enough not to scream for attention, consistent enough to be intentional. The same amount twice a month, like a subscription. Or like support. I clicked into it and found an email receipt attached, sent to his account, not ours. A gift card purchase, with a note field. The message was short, casual, intimate. For your place, can't wait to be there again. My hands went numb. Your place. Not our home. Not our life. His life, somewhere else. And that's when the story in my head, the one that painted him as stressed, busy, overwhelmed, collapsed. Stress doesn't buy gift cards for your place. Work doesn't require hiding your phone in the shower. A tired marriage doesn't produce reservations labeled anniversary with another woman's name. My sadness had been real, but it had been incomplete. Now it expanded into something heavier, understanding. I wasn't dealing with forgetfulness. I was dealing with a system. Trust versus surveillance. I hated that I was here, scrolling, searching, collecting. I hated the way it made me feel like a detective in my own marriage. But the alternative was worse, staying blind because blindness was easier for him. I sat down at the table, my untouched anniversary table, and felt a strange clarity settle over me. Not peace, not yet, but clarity sharp and undeniable. He hadn't slipped once. He built a rhythm, and he'd built it on the assumption that I would keep doubting myself instead of believing what I saw. Once you notice the pattern, you stop asking if it's real, and start asking how long you've been living inside a lie. The next morning, I woke up with the kind of calm that only comes after your heart has already done the breaking. My body felt heavy, but my mind was alert, too alert, like every nerve had decided it was done being lied to. He acted normal. That's the part that still makes my skin crawl when I remember it. He stood at the sink brushing his teeth, humming softly. He poured coffee into a mug, my mug, and opened his laptop like he was a man who still belonged in this life. He didn't mention last night. He didn't mention the anniversary. He didn't mention my face, which must have looked like someone standing at the edge of a cliff. "Morning," he said. "Morning," I answered, and the word felt like a test. If I said it too warmly, I'd be participating in my own erasure. If I said it too coldly, he'd accuse me of making drama. So I kept it level, neutral, the way you speak to someone you're observing. He checked his phone twice before taking the first sip of coffee. My stomach turned. I couldn't live in questions anymore. Not after Elise, not after your place. Not after the rhythm I'd mapped like proof on a courtroom wall. I needed something my mind couldn't twist into maybe. So while he showered, I did the smallest, most dangerous thing. I opened the shared calendar on the tablet again, the one we used to coordinate dentists and birthdays and bills. My hands moved with quiet purpose, not panic. I wasn't hunting anymore. I was confirming. There were events he'd created that never appeared on my phone. Private. Meetings with vague titles, client dinner, team check-in, networking. But one entry, 3 weeks back, caught my eye because it was different, too specific to be innocent, too familiar to ignore. E's birthday. A red dot beside it, meaning it had been marked important. Not my birthday, not our anniversary, not his mother. Hey. My heart beat once, hard, like it was warning me not to click. I clicked anyway. The description field had only 2 words. Don't be late. My mouth went dry. Hey, Elise. There was a time attached, a location. And the location wasn't a restaurant. It was an office building I recognized, his company's downtown branch. Something cold slid through my chest, because suddenly Elise wasn't a vague name floating in email receipts. She had coordinates, a place in his day, a place in our city, a place in his life. I put the tablet down and sat very still. I listened to the water running, the shower's steady roar. It sounded like distance. I didn't need to follow him physically to know the truth, but my body needed to see it. My body needed the moment my mind had been avoiding, the moment that would end all bargaining. That afternoon, he told me he had meetings. He said it like he always did, flat, unquestionable, a sentence designed to close the door on further conversation. Okay, I said, and my voice didn't tremble. He kissed my cheek quickly, grabbed his keys, and left without looking back. When the door clicked shut, I stood in the silence for 5 full minutes, letting my courage catch up to my actions. Then I grabbed my purse and followed at a distance, not in some dramatic movie chase, but in the slow, careful way someone moves when they know their life is about to change. Traffic was thick. I kept enough cars between us that I didn't feel ridiculous, but close enough that I didn't lose him. My hands gripped the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing left. He didn't go to his office. He drove past it. He drove toward the downtown branch. My throat tightened. At a red light, he glanced into his rearview mirror, and my entire body froze, convinced he could see me. But he was smiling at his phone. Smiling. A real smile, the kind I hadn't seen aimed at me in months. The light turned green and he moved forward, and I followed, a heartbeat behind. He parked in a lot beside the building and didn't rush inside like a man late for work. He sat there for a moment, still looking at his phone, typing. Then he stepped out, adjusted his shirt, smoothed his hair, and checked his reflection in the tinted window of his car. Grooming, ritual, performance. He wasn't preparing to work. He was preparing to be seen. My pulse roared in my ears. I parked across the street, far enough that it wouldn't be obvious, close enough that I could watch. I told myself I only needed one thing, confirmation. A face. A truth so concrete my denial couldn't soften it. For several minutes, nothing happened. People moved in and out of the building, business suits, backpacks, coffee cups. Life, indifferent to my private disaster. Then the lobby doors opened again. And she walked out like she belonged to a different world. She wasn't a stranger. That was the first shock. I knew her. Not well, not intimately, but enough that my brain recognized her before my heart could. I'd seen her at company gatherings, at the holiday party, standing near the dessert table, at a charity event, laughing too loudly at his jokes. She was the kind of woman who seemed effortless, polished without looking like she tried. She had dark hair pulled back in a sleek clip, gold earrings that caught the light, and a posture that made her look like she never apologized for taking up space. Elise. And then my husband turned toward her. He didn't just wave. He didn't just nod politely. He lit up. It was like watching a candle flare when you thought the wick was dead. He smiled at her the way he used to smile at me, wide, soft around the eyes, unguarded. He stepped forward quickly, as if the world had been holding its breath until she arrived. And then, without hesitation, he reached for her hand. Her hand. Public, casual, familiar. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like falling. A sound escaped my throat, silent, more like air than a word, and I clapped a hand over my mouth as if I could physically hold myself together. They stood close, too close for coworkers. She said something, and he laughed. Not the polite chuckle he gave me when I talked about my day, but a full laugh. the kind that comes from ease. Then she leaned in, and he kissed her. Not a quick secret peck. A kiss that lasted. A kiss that made her smile when they separated, like she'd been rewarded. My vision blurred at the edges, not because I was crying yet, because my body couldn't process it all at once. My hands tingled. My skin felt too tight. The world around me went strangely quiet, like someone had turned down the volume on everything except my heartbeat. Marriage, vows versus public replacement. It wasn't only that he was cheating. It was how normal it looked. How practiced. How unashamed. He guided her toward his car with a hand at her lower back, a gesture so intimate it felt illegal to witness. He opened the passenger door for her like a gentleman, like romance lived naturally in his muscles, like he hadn't left me at home swallowing my dignity. She slid into the seat and glanced around, smiling, relaxed. She didn't look like a woman sneaking. She looked like a woman arriving, like she belonged there. Like she'd been told she did. He closed the door, walked around the front of the car, and before he got into the driver's seat, he paused, just for a second, to check his phone again. Then he typed something quickly, like finishing a sentence he'd started earlier. And then he drove away with her. On the day after our anniversary. After the night he claimed he ate with the guys. A heat rose behind my eyes, but my tears still didn't come. It was like my body was saving them for later because right now I needed to survive the moment. I sat in my car, frozen, watching the space where they'd been, and I felt something inside me crack, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, like a bone hairlining under pressure. This was the moment my mind had been resisting for months, and my body finally accepted it without negotiation. He didn't forget me. He moved on while still standing in my house. Love versus performance. He had performed exhaustion for me, performed busyness, performed Tuesday, performed we'll do something this weekend. And then he performed romance for her, reservations, champagne, songs, the careful hand on her back. The contrast was so sharp it made me nauseous. I pulled out my phone and looked at the date, like I needed confirmation that time was real. Yesterday, I had set a table for two like a faithful wife. Yesterday, he had sat at another table for two with her, under soft lighting, with champagne waiting, with a note saying, "Tonight is mine." And I was the person he came home to afterward, brushing his teeth, humming, acting normal. Humiliation crawled up my throat like bile, not because she was prettier, not because she won. Because he had made my devotion look foolish. Because he had used the symbolism of our anniversary, the one day meant to honor what we built, to celebrate someone else as if I were already gone. I drove home on autopilot, hands steady on the wheel while my mind spun. At stoplights, I stared straight ahead, afraid if I looked to the side I would see my own life from the outside and finally collapse. When I walked into the house, it smelled like coffee and detergent and the illusion of stability. I stood in the entryway and looked at our wedding photo on the wall, me in white, him in a suit, his hand on my waist, both of us smiling like we believed in forever. Forever. I used to think forever meant time. Now I understood forever is a choice, a daily act, a vow you honor in small ways when nobody's watching. He had stopped choosing me long before I caught up. That evening, when he came home, he acted exactly the same. He asked what was for dinner. He sighed about work. He scrolled his phone. He didn't know that I had seen him. Or maybe he didn't believe I ever would. I watched him across the room, the man I married and the stranger he'd become occupying the same skin, and I realized something that hurt worse than the kiss I'd witnessed. I thought the worst part would be seeing her. I was wrong. The worst part was realizing how easily he erased me. I didn't confront him that night. Not because I forgave him, and not because I was afraid of him, though there was a kind of fear in me, the fear of watching your life split in two and knowing you can't stitch it back together. I waited because I needed to meet him as the woman who knew, not the woman who begged. So I let him eat his dinner. I let him talk about work with that practiced sigh. I let him scroll his phone, face lit by secrets, while I sat across from him and watched my own patience harden into something I hadn't felt in a long time. Resolve. In the quiet hours after he fell asleep, I moved through the house like a person preparing for a storm. I saved screenshots. I emailed copies to myself. I wrote down dates and times like I was building a case. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally understood the rules. Feelings were soft. Proof was steel. The next evening, I asked him to sit down. Just that. No yelling, no shaking voice, no dramatic announcement. "Can you sit with me for a minute?" I said, and my tone was so calm it made him wary. He hesitated like a man deciding whether to step into a room he might not control. "What's this about?" he asked, already defensive. "Just sit," I repeated, and for the first time in a long time, my words didn't make room for his comfort. He sat on the edge of the couch, body angled like he might bolt. His phone was in his hand, of course. Even here, even now, he held it like a shield. I sat across from him, knees together, hands resting in my lap. I had imagined this moment 1,000 different ways over the past months, me crying, him apologizing, us talking until dawn. But the real moment felt nothing like the fantasy. The real moment felt cold and clear. "I know about Elise," I said. His eyes flicked up, sharp, then narrowed as if he hadn't heard me correctly. For a second, I thought he might finally look afraid. Instead, he did something worse. He smiled, small, dismissive. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. Denial, right out of the gate. No warm-up, no hesitation. Like lying was simply another language he was fluent in. I nodded once, not because I believed him, but because I expected it. "Okay," I said softly. "Then I'll be specific." I reached for my phone and placed it on the coffee table between us, like a neutral third party. I opened the screenshot of the reservation email. I didn't shove it in his face. I simply turned the screen toward him. Reservation confirmed. 7:30, table for two. Occasion, anniversary. Guest name, Elise. He glanced at it for half a second, then looked away like he could erase it by refusing to see. That's nothing," he said quickly. "It could be anything." I kept my voice level. "It's our anniversary date." He shrugged, too casual. "Maybe I booked it for us and forgot to put your name." I stared at him. "You forgot my name." He exhaled sharply, annoyed. "You're twisting things." There it was, his favorite move. Make me the unreasonable one. Make the truth feel like overreaction. "I'm not twisting anything," I said. "I watched you kiss her outside the downtown branch yesterday." That landed differently. His shoulders stiffened. His eyes widened, just a fraction. For the first time, the performance cracked enough to show the man underneath. "You followed me," he snapped, anger rising like a shield. I didn't flinch. "Yes." "How long have you been doing that?" he demanded, leaning forward now, voice sharp with accusation. "That's insane." Insane. The word hit me like a familiar slap. He wanted the conversation to be about my behavior, my craziness, my violation of his privacy, anything but the fact that he had another woman's mouth on his. Truth versus control. I let his outrage hang in the air for a moment, then I said, "Don't do that." He blinked. "Don't do what?" "Don't turn this into me," I said, still calm. "You don't get to cheat and then act like I'm the villain for noticing." His jaw tightened. He looked away, shaking his head like I was exhausting. "You don't know what you saw." I opened another screenshot. Hotel bar receipt, date, and time. Another gift card with a note. Another the calendar entry, E's birthday. Don't be late. "I know exactly what I saw," I said, "and I know what I found." For a moment, he said nothing. He stared at the phone on the table like it had betrayed him. Then he did something I didn't expect. He didn't apologize. He negotiated. "Okay," he said, voice lower, smoother, like a salesman switching strategies. "Look, it's not what you think." I almost laughed again, this time because the line was so predictable it felt scripted. "Then what is it?" I asked. He rubbed his face, sighing as if this was all too much for him to carry. She's someone from work. We've been talking, that's all. Kissing is talking now, I asked. He ignored that. We've just been close, he admitted, carefully, choosing words like he was bargaining down a price. But nothing serious. Nothing serious. He used our anniversary for it. He bought champagne. He requested our song, but sure, nothing serious. I leaned back slightly, letting him keep speaking, because I wanted to hear how far he would go to avoid truth. We've been going through a rough patch, he continued, and here it came, his pivot. You've been distant too, you know. It's not like things have been good. My stomach clenched, not because his words hurt, but because they revealed how he framed everything. Your pain is evidence against you. I've been asking you for months if we're okay, I said. You told me I was imagining it. He scoffed, because you were always looking for a problem. I stared at him, the audacity almost breathtaking. I wasn't looking for a problem, I said. I was looking for you. He pressed on, faster now, as if speed could overwhelm my clarity. I felt unseen, okay? I felt like no matter what I did, it wasn't enough. You were always tired, always stressed. You stopped trying. The words were sharp, designed to land like guilt. And for a split second, they almost did. Because that's the trap of long-term manipulation. It trains you to automatically check yourself first. To ask, what did I do wrong? Even when someone is handing you their betrayal like a gift. But then I remembered the reservation note. Tonight is mine. That wasn't about feeling unseen. That was about wanting more. I took a slow breath. So you felt unseen, I said carefully. And your solution was to use our anniversary to celebrate another woman. His mouth opened, then closed. He shifted, frustrated. You're stuck on the anniversary thing like I planned it to hurt you. I looked at him steady. Did you not plan it? He hesitated, just a second too long. I didn't think about it, he said finally. There it was, the minimizing, the attempt to make cruelty sound accidental. You didn't think about it? I repeated, my voice still even, but something in my eyes must have changed because he flinched slightly. You didn't think about the one day that's supposed to be ours. You didn't think about me waiting at home. You didn't think about me setting a table for you. You didn't think. He raised his hands, palms up, like a man trying to calm an unreasonable woman. I said I'm sorry. No, I said quietly. You said words. His face hardened. What do you want from me? The question was almost comical in its selfishness. What do you want? After he'd taken what he wanted and expected me to keep smiling. I want the truth, I said. He laughed once, humorless. You have your truth. You made up your mind. I felt something shift again, an internal click, like a lock turning. This was the moment I realized. He wasn't going to confess in a way that made me feel whole. He was going to confess only enough to manage the damage, only enough to keep options open. He wasn't fighting for the marriage. He was fighting for control. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. How long? I asked. He blinked. What? How long have you been seeing her? He looked away. It doesn't matter. It matters, I said, firmer now. Answer. His eyes snapped back to mine, anger flaring. Why? So you can torture yourself with details. No, so I can stop being tortured by lies. Answer, I said again. His jaw worked. A few months, he muttered. A few, I repeated. 3, 6. He slammed his hand on the couch cushion. I don't know. Time flies. Time flies. That was his defense. Time. I sat back, letting the silence stretch. My chest hurt, but my voice stayed steady, and that steadiness felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. The woman I used to be in arguments, crying, apologizing, trying to make him comfortable, was gone. In her place was someone who could finally see the structure of the lie. He tried again, softer. Look, I didn't mean for it to happen like this. Elise understands me. She listens. With you, everything feels heavy. Heavy? As if my needs were weights. As if my pain was inconvenient. As if the years I carried our life weren't real because he didn't want to feel them. I nodded slowly. So you chose lightness, I said. You chose someone who didn't ask you to be accountable. His eyes narrowed. That's not fair. Fair, I echoed, and my voice finally cracked, not into tears, but into a laugh edged with disbelief. You want fair? Fair would have been you telling me you were unhappy. Fair would have been you leaving before you replaced me. Fair would have been you not using our anniversary like a stage for your new life. He flinched at the word stage. Because that's what it was. Love as performance. Romance as proof of power. The champagne, the song, the note, none of it was about love. It was about a story he wanted to live where he was the hero, not the man who slowly disappeared from his wife. I looked at him and felt the full shape of the betrayal settle into place. It wasn't only that he cheated. It was that he had trained me to doubt myself while he curated someone else's affection. It was that he had smiled at her in public while coming home to me like I was furniture. Tears finally came then, hot and quiet, sliding down my face without sound. Not the messy sobbing of someone pleading, the controlled tears of someone grieving something already dead. He saw them and shifted again, tactics changing. Don't cry, he said, irritated, like my tears were a problem to manage. We can fix this. Fix this. Now that I had proof, now that the map was on the table. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, staring straight at him. Do you love her? I asked. He hesitated. That hesitation was the answer. I nodded slowly. Okay, I whispered. Then here's what's going to happen. His eyes widened slightly. What do you mean? I took a breath, the kind of breath you take before stepping off a ledge and trusting you'll land somewhere new. You're going to stop lying to me, I said. You're going to stop pretending this is my fault, and you're going to understand that the version of me who begs for the truth is gone. He stared, silent now, because he could feel it, the shift in power, the moment he lost control of the narrative. In that moment, I understood. He wasn't sorry he hurt me. He was sorry I found the map. The day after I confronted him, the house felt like a place that had been evacuated. Everything was still there, furniture, photos, the faint scent of his cologne in the hallway, but the meaning had drained out. It was no longer our home. It was a stage after the audience leaves, props waiting for a story that won't be performed again. He tried to act like we were still in the negotiation phase. He made coffee like nothing had changed. He asked if I wanted some, like kindness could erase betrayal. He moved around the kitchen with careful calm, as if he could keep the air gentle enough, I would fold back into the version of myself that swallowed pain quietly. But I didn't. I watched him with a new kind of attention, not romantic attention, clinical attention, like I was studying a person I used to know. You don't have to tell anyone, he said that morning, leaning against the counter. Let's just keep this between us while we figure it out. Between us. Like Elise hadn't already joined us. Like secrecy was a marriage-saving tool, not the glue he used to hold his double life together. What you mean is, I replied, you don't want consequences. His jaw tightened. I don't want drama. It took everything in me not to laugh, because what he called drama was simply reality spoken out loud. You should have thought about that before you made our anniversary your rehearsal dinner, I said, and his eyes flashed, not with shame, but with anger. That was the first time I saw it clearly. He wasn't afraid of losing me. He was afraid of losing his image. And once I understood that, everything he did afterward made perfect sense. He began managing the story like a PR crisis. When he took calls, he lowered his voice and walked outside. When his phone buzzed, he turned his body away from me like a reflex. He started leaving earlier, coming home later, claiming he was giving me space, when really he was buying time to decide which version of himself to present to which audience. I didn't announce our breakup to the world in a dramatic post. I didn't blast screenshots or tag anyone. I simply did what I'd avoided for too long. I told one person the truth. My sister. I called her from the bedroom, door closed, voice shaking more than I wanted it to. She picked up on the second ring. Hey, she said, cheerful. How was your anniversary? The question cracked something in my throat, but I forced the words out anyway. He didn't forget, I said. He replaced me. Silence. Then her voice dropped. What? I told her enough. Not every detail, the reservation, the kiss, Elise's name, but enough that she understood the shape of it. I expected her to gasp, to rage, to demand I leave that second. Instead, she went very quiet and said, "Are you safe?" That question, simple, steady, was the first time I felt held in days. When she arrived an hour later, she didn't come with advice. She came with presence. She hugged me like she was trying to put my body back together, and I didn't realize how badly I needed that until I started crying into her shoulder. But support, I learned, is not evenly distributed, and the fallout spreads faster than you think. By evening, he'd told his brother. Not the truth, his version. His brother called him while he was in the shower, and the name lit up on the screen on the counter. I didn't answer. I didn't touch his phone. I didn't need to. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. From Mark, his brother. "Hey, can we talk? I heard you and husband are going through something. I just want to understand." I stared at the message and felt that familiar trap open beneath me. The trap where I'm asked to be calm and reasonable while someone else controls the narrative. The trap where the betrayed woman is expected to soften the truth so the betrayer doesn't look too ugly. I replied with one sentence. He's been seeing someone else. No extra emotion, no paragraphs, just fact. The response came minutes later. Okay, I didn't know it was like that. Like that. As if there was a version of cheating that could be, not like that. The next day, his mother called. I almost didn't answer because I already knew what was coming. Not because she didn't love me, she did, in her way. But she loved her son's comfort more than she loved the idea of accountability. When I picked up, her voice was strained. "Honey," she began, "I heard there been tension." Tension. That's what betrayal becomes when people are afraid of the truth. "I'm not sure what he told you," I said carefully. She sighed. "He said you've both been stressed, that you've been distant, that he felt lonely." I closed my eyes. Of course that's what he said. Because in his story, he was the victim of my failure, not the author of my pain. "He's been having an affair," I said, plain as stone. A pause, then, "Are you sure?" That question, "Are you sure?" burned in my chest like acid. Not because I wasn't sure, because it showed me how quickly people doubt the woman who speaks up. "Yes," I said, "I'm sure." More silence. Then her voice softened into something I recognized, concern for the wrong thing. "Well, I'm not defending him," she said quickly, which is what people say right before they defend him. "But marriages go through phases. Maybe this doesn't need to become public." Public. There it was again. Reputation over responsibility. "I'm not trying to embarrass anyone," I replied, keeping my voice controlled. "I'm trying to protect myself." She sighed like I was making her life difficult. "I just don't want the family to be torn apart." Family. As if the tearing hadn't already happened. As if my pain was the rip, not his choices. When we hung up, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from rage. Quiet, sharp rage at how fast the conversation had turned from what he did to what I should do to keep things comfortable for everyone else. Loyalty versus convenience. People want peace the way they want clean floors. They don't care how you scrub, as long as it looks nice when company comes over. Our mutual friends were worse. At first, they reached out in that vague, careful way people do when they sense scandal. "Hey, checking in. Heard you guys are having a rough patch. Let me know if you need anything." But when I told the truth, their messages changed. Not all of them. Some were furious on my behalf, fiercely loyal, the kind of friends who don't require you to perform sadness politely. Those friends brought me food, sat with me, asked real questions. They didn't try to fix the story, they just held it. But others became strange. They used phrases like both sides. They asked what I did that pushed him away. They told me, "He's still a good guy," as if goodness is measured by how charming you are in public, not how honest you are in private. One friend, someone I'd trusted for years, said, "I just think you should keep it quiet until you decide what you're doing. People don't need to know." I looked at her and realized what she meant. People don't need to be uncomfortable. People don't need to choose. People don't need to risk their relationship with him. My pain was inconvenient. And then, like a cruel joke, the holiday party photos started popping up in my memory. Elise, the woman I'd seen at events, laughing near him, orbiting in the same rooms I stood in. The realization hit me with a second wave of humiliation. How many times had I been beside them without knowing I was the only one not in on the truth? That's what replacement does. It doesn't just remove you. It makes you feel like you were never necessary in the first place. While the social shockwaves spread, the practical reality arrived like a bill. I opened our accounts and started making lists. Rent, utilities, insurance, savings. The little shared subscriptions that suddenly felt obscene, streaming services, gym memberships, things that assumed a shared future. I created a new bank account in my name only. I changed passwords. I printed statements. Not because I wanted to destroy him, but because I no longer trusted the man who could label another woman anniversary and come home like nothing happened. He noticed, of course. "You're being dramatic," he said when he saw the paperwork on the dining table. "No," I replied. "I'm being prepared." He scoffed. "So you're really doing this?" I looked at him, tired in a way sleep can't fix. "You did this," I said quietly. "I'm responding." He tried again to steer the narrative. "I'm not a monster. I didn't plan to hurt you." But he had planned the dinner, planned the champagne, planned the song, planned the note, planned the lie. He didn't plan to get caught. And then came the moment the mask slipped for real, outside our house, in front of people. It happened at a small gathering we were both expected to attend, a friend's birthday dinner that had been on the calendar for weeks. He insisted we go. "We can't just stop living," he said, as if I was the one breaking routine. When we arrived, he played the part of the steady husband, hand on my back, a polite smile, a careful laugh. He introduced me like I was still his wife in every sense. But then his phone buzzed, his eyes dipped, and something softened in his face so naturally it made my stomach turn. He turned away, thumb moving quickly. And I saw it. Not the message, the reaction. That gentle smile, that private warmth, the face he never gave me anymore. One of our friends noticed too. "Everything okay?" she asked him. He glanced up, startled, and the warmth vanished like a light switched off. "Yeah," he said too quickly. "Work. Work again." I sat there watching him perform, watching him split himself in real time, and the embarrassment turned into clarity. This wasn't only between me and him anymore. This was a man preserving his image by using my silence as a shield. Back at home, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while he slept beside me like a stranger renting space. My heart wanted to bargain. Maybe if I'm calmer, maybe if I'm kinder, maybe if I'm prettier, maybe if I forgive faster. That urge to negotiate for scraps of love is powerful. It feels like survival. But survival isn't love, it's fear. And I was done living inside fear. I expected heartbreak. I didn't expect the second betrayal. How many people asked me to stay quiet to keep things peaceful? The morning I decided to leave didn't feel dramatic. It didn't feel like a movie scene where a woman throws clothes into a suitcase while empowering music plays in the background. It felt like brushing my teeth and realizing I couldn't keep tasting lies. He was asleep when I slipped out of bed. His arm lay across the pillow where my head used to be, like he still expected my body to stay in place even if my heart didn't. I stood in the doorway and watched him for a moment, this man who could look peaceful after tearing someone apart. Then I walked into the kitchen and made a list. Not an emotional list, a practical one, the kind of list you make when you're done waiting for a person to become safe. Separate money. Find a place to stay. Call a lawyer. Get support. Do not negotiate my worth. I stared at the last line for a long time because it was the hardest. I'd spent months, maybe years, trying to prove I was lovable enough to be chosen. I'd been competing with a version of myself I thought he wanted. Quieter, easier, less needy, less real. A ghost version. And I realized something painful. You can't win a competition that was designed to keep you running. The first boundary I set was small. It didn't look like strength from the outside. It looked like silence. When he came into the kitchen, sleepy and casual, he said, "Morning," as if we hadn't detonated our life the week before. "Morning," I replied, and continued packing my lunch for work. He leaned against the counter. "So, what are we doing?" He said we now, like the words still belonged to him. "I'm meeting with someone today," I said. His brow furrowed. "Who?" "A lawyer," I answered, and the calmness in my voice made his face tighten. "You're serious," he said, like he was surprised I had the ability to follow through. "I've been serious," I replied. "You just didn't believe I'd stop accepting less." He scoffed. "This is so extreme." Extreme. The word he used for my boundaries, not his betrayal. I didn't argue. That was another boundary. No more debates about reality. No more defending my feelings to a man who treated truth like a negotiation. I left the house with my keys in my hand, and the air outside felt different. Not happier, not yet, but cleaner, like I'd stepped out of a room that had been slowly poisoning me. The lawyer's office smelled like coffee and paper, neutral, professional, nothing like the emotional wreckage I carried inside. I sat across from a woman with kind eyes and told her the facts. I didn't tell her the romantic story. I didn't tell her how much I'd tried. I told her what mattered now: accounts, assets, names on documents, patterns, proof. As I spoke, I realized how often I'd softened my own pain when I talked to people. How I'd said things like, "Maybe I'm overreacting," or "It's complicated," as if my suffering needed permission. But in that office, with someone who didn't know him, the story became simple. He cheated, he lied, he hid money, he manipulated the narrative. And suddenly, my instincts didn't sound dramatic. They sounded accurate. When I left, I sat in my car and cried, not because the meeting broke me, but because it reminded me I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined the erosion. I'd been living it. That afternoon, I opened a new bank account with only my name. I transferred a portion of my paycheck to it. I changed passwords. I canceled shared subscriptions. I turned off auto payments that drained my money into a life that no longer belonged to me. Each small action felt like reclaiming a piece of myself he'd been using without asking. That's what betrayal does. It doesn't just hurt your heart. It rearranges your sense of safety. You start checking locks twice. You hesitate before trusting a compliment. You replay conversations to see where you missed the knife. So I did the other thing I'd avoided for too long. I found a therapist. Walking into that first session felt like admitting defeat. Like saying out loud, I couldn't fix this alone. But as I sat on that couch and spoke the words, something inside me loosened. "I feel stupid," I confessed, "like I should have known." My therapist didn't flinch. She said, "You trusted someone you loved. That's not stupidity. That's humanity." Humanity. I hadn't offered myself that word in a long time. Week by week, I started to see the deeper wound. I wasn't just cheated on. I was conditioned. He had trained me to accept less by rewarding silence and punishing questions. He taught me that my needs were inconvenient, my instincts were paranoia, my emotions were drama. Over time, I stopped trusting myself because it made life easier with him. Self-abandonment disguised as peace. And now, in the quiet aftermath, I had to learn how to come back to myself like I was someone worth returning to. I started with routines. I chose mornings again, real mornings, not waiting mornings. I woke up and moved my body, even when I didn't want to. I drank water. I ate breakfast. I stopped skipping meals because stress made me forget. I made my bed, not because I cared about neatness, but because it reminded me I could create order in my own life. I texted friends I'd slowly drifted from, not the ones who told me to be quiet, but the ones who believed me without demanding I perform my pain politely. I let them take me out for soup. I let them sit beside me without talking. I let myself be held by community, even when shame tried to isolate me. Because shame will always tell you to disappear. I refused. The hardest nights were the quiet ones. The ones where the house felt too big, and my phone stayed silent, and my brain tried to romanticize the past. I'd remember him bringing me flowers once, years ago, and my heart would ache as if that memory could resurrect the marriage. I'd remember the way he used to touch my face when he kissed me, and loneliness would whisper, maybe you can forgive. Maybe you can go back. Maybe you can survive it. Survive. That word used to sound like strength. Now it sounded like a cage. I learned to interrupt the spiral with truth. Truth sounded like this. If he wanted to choose you, he would. Truth sounded like this. Love doesn't require you to shrink. Truth sounded like this. You're not leaving because you're weak. You're leaving because you finally see what staying costs. Some days I failed. Some days I cried in the shower so no one could hear. Some days I stared at my wedding ring on the dresser and felt like I was grieving a person who never actually existed, because the man I missed was a version of him that only showed up when it benefited him. But even on the hardest days, I didn't go back. I moved into a small apartment that smelled like fresh paint and possibility. The first night there, I slept on an air mattress with a blanket that wasn't warm enough, and still, I slept deeper than I had in months. No footsteps in the hallway, no phone buzzing in the dark, no feeling of being watched while being ignored. Just me. I started saying things out loud that I had swallowed for years. I don't like that. That doesn't work for me. No. No became my prayer. He called, of course. Not immediately, not when he was still high on the thrill of being chosen by someone new. He called when consequences started to scrape at him, when mutual friends asked questions, when his image developed cracks. His voice on the phone was softer than it had been in weeks. "Can we talk?" he asked. I held the phone away from my ear for a second, looking at it like it was an artifact from an old life. "What do you want to talk about?" I asked. "I miss you," he said, and for a moment my heart betrayed me with hope. Then he added, "This is all messy. We don't have to do it like this." Messy, not painful, not wrong, messy. I exhaled slowly. "I'm not doing this to punish you," I said. "I'm doing this to protect me." He was quiet. Then, careful, he tried again. "Elise, it's complicated." I felt my spine straighten. "No," I said. "It's simple. You lied, you replaced me, and now you don't like the consequences." His voice tightened. "So that's it, you're just done." I looked around my small apartment. The thrifted couch, the open boxes, the curtains I hadn't hung yet. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy, but it was mine. "Yes," I said, "I'm done." When I ended the call, my hands shook, not from regret, but from adrenaline. Because leaving isn't one decision. It's 1,000 decisions made over and over, especially when the person who hurt you tries to sound like home. That's when I finally understood what love must include. Respect. Truth. Choice. Not performance, not secrecy, not silence traded for crumbs. I didn't stop loving him overnight. Love doesn't disappear just because truth arrives, but I stopped abandoning myself for it, and that was the beginning of my real life. People think leaving is the hard part. The hardest part is staying gone when loneliness tries to sound like love. For a long time, I thought my husband forgetting our anniversary would be the worst kind of heartbreak. I imagined the sadness of being overlooked, the quiet disappointment of being taken for granted. I imagined a fight, an apology, a make-up dinner a week later where we laughed about how busy life had been. I didn't imagine being replaced. But now, with distance between us and silence where his voice used to live, I can admit something that took me months to understand. He didn't forget me. He revealed himself. The anniversary wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. It was a mirror. And once I saw what he was capable of doing on a day meant to honor us, I couldn't unsee the shape of his love, How conditional it had become, how self-serving, how easily it moved toward whatever made him feel powerful. That realization hurt, but it also did something else. It freed me. In the beginning, I carried humiliation like a second skin. I replayed the details like punishment. The reservation, the champagne, the song that used to belong to us. I pictured him in that restaurant, leaning toward her, smiling like the man I remembered, while I sat at home pretending a candle could keep a marriage alive. I obsessed over the question that eats women alive in these stories. What did she have that I did? Was she more beautiful, more exciting, less complicated? Did she laugh at his jokes the way I used to before I became tired from carrying both of us? Did she make him feel like a hero? I wanted to find the flaw in myself, because if I could name the flaw, maybe I could fix it. Maybe I could earn my way back into being chosen. That was the old pattern, self-abandonment dressed as love. But slowly, as my life began to belong to me again, I started asking a different question. What did he have to lose by telling the truth? And the answer was simple: his comfort, his image, his options. He wanted the security of marriage and the thrill of secrecy. He wanted to be the good guy in public and the wanted man in private. He wanted applause without responsibility. That's not love, that's appetite. Greed versus integrity. Integrity is choosing one life and living it honestly, even when it's hard. Greed is taking what you want from multiple people and calling it complicated so you don't have to be accountable. The more I sat with that, the more my shame began to dissolve. Because shame had made me believe I was the one who wasn't enough, when the truth was that he didn't know how to be enough for anyone once the work of real love began. Real love doesn't get bored with you. It doesn't punish you for having needs. It doesn't label your pain drama while it plans champagne for someone else. And it doesn't erase you. When I moved into my apartment, I expected the quiet to feel like punishment. I expected to miss him so much it would hollow me out. And I did miss him, sometimes violently, sometimes in the smallest ways, like reaching for my phone to text him something funny before remembering my life had changed. But the quiet also gave me something I hadn't had in years. Clarity. Without him in the room, I could finally hear my own instincts again. I could feel how often I'd been bracing for dismissal, how often I'd been shrinking to fit the mood he brought home. I could see the years I spent doing emotional gymnastics just to keep things peaceful. Peaceful, another word people love to use when they mean silent. There's a kind of peace that comes from love, soft, safe, mutual. And there's a kind of peace that comes from self-erasure. I had been living in the second one, calling it marriage. Once I saw that, the anniversary became something else in my mind. It stopped being the day he broke me and became the day I stopped lying to myself. Because if he had simply forgotten, I might have kept trying. I might have accepted another apology, another rescheduled dinner, another season of waiting. Forgetting would have been small enough for me to forgive. But replacing me, using our sacred day as a stage for someone else, was too loud to ignore. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a message. And the message was clear. He was willing to trade my dignity for his desire. That kind of clarity is painful, but it is also a gift. Not the kind you wrap, the kind that cuts the rope you didn't realize was tied around your waist. I wish I could say the ending was clean. It was. There were arguments about money. There were awkward conversations with friends who wanted me to be the bigger person. As if being bigger meant being quieter. There were days I felt like a failure because my marriage didn't survive. But in the middle of all that mess, something unexpected grew. Strength. Not the loud kind. Not the look at me thriving kind. The quiet kind that shows up when nobody is applauding you. The kind that makes you pay your own bills, eat dinner alone without scrolling for distraction, choose yourself even when your heart tries to bargain. The kind of strength that says, I will not compete for a place that should have been mine by love, not by negotiation. And here is the truth I didn't see at first. I wasn't replaced because I was worthless. I was replaced because he wanted a version of love that didn't require integrity. He wanted romance without responsibility, attention without accountability, validation without effort. He wanted a woman who didn't know his patterns yet, someone who still believed the performance. I had stopped believing it. So no, I didn't get replaced. I got released. Released from carrying a marriage that only survived when I carried it alone. Released from chasing affection that came with conditions. Released from questioning my instincts every time they spoke. Released from a role where I was never truly chosen, only kept. Sometimes the most merciful thing someone can do is reveal the truth so clearly you can't pretend anymore. That's what my anniversary became. Not a funeral for my marriage, but an awakening for my life. Now, when that date comes around each year, I don't dread it. I don't count it as a loss. I mark it as a turning point. The day I learned that love without respect is not love. It's a transaction. And I don't live transactionally anymore. I don't accept half-truths. I don't shrink to keep someone comfortable. I don't confuse waiting with devotion. I don't confuse jealousy with love. I don't confuse loneliness with fate. I choose people who choose me back. Because that's what integrity looks like in a relationship. Mutual choice, made openly, made daily. So if you're listening to this and you recognize the feeling, the quiet dread, the unanswered messages, the way your instincts keep tapping you on the shoulder while someone tells you you're paranoid, I'll ask you what I wish someone had asked me sooner. If someone can replace you on the one day meant to honor you, what else have you been calling love?